Now, Eskom has asked the National Energy Regulator to approve a 36% price increase for its 2026 financial year. This is a figure far surpassing the country's inflation rate. Earlier on, I caught up with independent economic and energy analyst Tshepo Kgadima to look into this proposed price hike. Here's that conversation.
The question is that is Eskom still in a financial pickle? The answer is no. They have received a 254 billion rand bailout, and therefore I can't understand why they find it necessary to still make a case that the tariffs that they currently enjoy are in fact below what they term a cost reflectiveness. So what are the facts? The facts are as follows.
Yeah.
The cost of producing electricity by Eskom, with its own admission from its own audited financial statements, is 44 cents a kilowatt hour. Based on my expert opinion, the cost should actually come down to 32 cents a kilowatt hour. That means to produce electricity before that electricity is transmitted and distributed to the end user. And when you now factor the cost of transmission, of distribution, all other associated costs, the overall all-in cost of not only generating electricity, but transmitting and distributing it to the end user is 87 cents a kilowatt hour. And therefore, I think that Eskom is going to have an exceedingly difficult task to be able to sustain the argument that the tariffs that they are currently receiving are in fact below the cost reflective bar. What they will effectively need to do, and I've been advocating this for some time, is that both Parliament, the relevant ministry, which is the Ministry of Energy and Electricity, together with NERSA, and obviously the Eskom board, they need to take measures to drop the electricity tariffs to R1.16 a kilowatt hour, and then increase in line with the inflation, which in turn would mean for the year 2025, electricity tariffs must be R1.22. Because if we can have a R1.22 standardized tariff in South Africa, Eskom would have the opportunity of selling no less than 234 terawatt hours of electricity per year. And that would in turn mean that the electricity consumption per capita in South Africa will at least improve from the current low levels of 2.7 megawatt hours per capita to 3.8 megawatt hours per capita. That will then give the economy of South Africa a very good fighting chance to grow the economy. The GDP would grow by at least 3.4%. And with a 3.4% GDP growth, we of course then as a country and as an economy can be able to tackle the high levels of unemployment, the poverty levels, whereby people now have to decide between, do I buy electricity or do I buy food, notwithstanding that by the very high electricity tariffs that we have, the cost of food itself has become unaffordable. But also, not only will we be able to address the high levels of unemployment with a higher electricity consumption per capita, which results from lower tariffs, but at the same time, we will be competitive as an economy, therefore attract the much more needed investment, long-term investment in what they call the fourth industrial revolution economies, whether you're talking about data centers, whether you're talking about anything that has to do with artificial intelligence, and of course also be able to be back to the heydays when we were an industrialized economy, particularly in terms of mining and mineral processing, because that industry itself, it is energy intensive. So the energy intensive industries desperately need a lower tariff, and a tariff of R1.22 is what gives us that fighting chance.
It's quite interesting, Tshepo, because you're basically saying that Eskom's focus should not be on this tariff hike, but instead they need to turn inward. I'm just wondering then, I mean, how much can NERSA intervene in this, considering the fact that you're saying that the problems that they are perceiving aren't really going to be solved by a tariff hike?
Well, in the very first instance, NERSA must refuse to grant the demanded tariff by Eskom of 36%. I just cannot understand why NERSA finds it that they are obligated to actually have to grant a, because if NERSA was to ask the correct questions, Eskom would be found wanting on the facts. And those correct questions will then justify why the tariff increase of 36% must therefore be summarily refused in the first instance.
Yeah.
But at the same time is for Parliament and the government to then take active measures to bring down the electricity tariffs from the already higher levels, which we currently are experiencing as a country. But NERSA's duty as an independent regulator is duty bound to ask the correct questions with relation, which will expose the very unwarranted, high, what I would term fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And I have said this at nauseam at various forums, that Eskom is currently suffering from an over 80 billion rand a year in fruitless and wasteful expenditure, which the management of Eskom, the board of Eskom, it is within their own control. If they are not able to reduce and cut off that 80 billion rand a year in fruitless and wasteful expenditure, of course it is not surprising that they find themselves in this position where they are saying, well, we are in a financially precarious situation. And the Minister of Energy, it is flabbergasting to say the least, that he believes that if Eskom is not granted what it demands in terms of a 36% plus electricity tariff increases, therefore there is a risk of the country being plunged into darkness, because that is not true. Right now, Eskom, of course, has stopped with load shedding, as I had always made an assertion that within a 90-day period, Eskom can stop load shedding. Now that has happened. And when you look at what was the cause of the load shedding coming to an end, was at the generation level. And it is at the generation level where the rubber meets the road. And we know that at 44 cents, they are still manageable. But I'm saying the management of Eskom generation, they need to then take appropriate measures to bring down the primary energy costs to the 32 cents a kilowatt hour level, so that Eskom can continue to be viable financially, but at the same time play the critical role that it needs to play in our economy, particularly if we are to make that giant leap into the fourth industrial revolution arena, but at the same time re-industrialize as a nation. Because right now we have been de-industrializing, and the effects of de-industrialization of our economy have manifested in consistently lower electricity demand, whereby now, as I make mention, that our electricity consumption per capita is a measly 2.7 megawatt hours. When, if you look at the Scandinavian countries, the United States, all of them are at more than 12 megawatt hours per capita consumption of electricity. And so I'm proposing that with the lower tariffs, we can then get to at least 3.8. And then by the year 2026, 2027, we need to have done everything. We need to have attracted investment into these energy-intensive industries, therefore bring our electricity consumption per capita to at least 5.5 megawatt hours. And at an electricity consumption of 5.5 megawatt hours, then you can have an economy which will grow in line with the goals of the National Development Plan. I mean, if we can get to even 3.4% GDP growth, we have not been able to achieve that in the last 7 years. So the point, therefore, is that This is a very serious issue beyond just pleading for electricity to be affordable to the ordinary people. We need to think economy.
Yeah.
And there is no economy that can sustainably grow when the electricity as well as energy costs overall are as high as what we are having in South Africa.
That was Tshepo Kgadima, independent economic and energy analyst.